Hey there! Today I'm starting a new 3-part mini-series about migrating the heart of my smart home and my home network. So right now it's just a single Docker server, a Docker host that runs pretty much everything. But during the years I figured out that this might not be the best solution. So in this series we will experiment with new stuff, we will reconfigure existing solutions for the greater good. In this first part, I will concentrate on the basics, on the core functionality, and I will tell you everything as we go. So if you're interested, keep on watching. And if you're new to the channel, my name is László Merzel, and this channel deals with home automation, home networking, and sometimes with related stuff like DIY electronics and even a little bit of 3D printing. Anyway, let's kick off this series. So this is right now what I have at the moment. A single server running all my stuff, so a lot of containers, images, volumes, a lot of data in general. And yeah, this is not the best practice. This is what we call a single point of failure. If the server dies, the whole thing goes with it. Basically, I lose media playing capabilities around the house, lose all the home automation, all the scheduling, the backups, whatnot. So again, really not optimal. Also, what I forgot to mention in the intro, there's one more small server, sort of, which is running IPFire, and as you can see, it's pretty underutilized. Don't mind the missing data, it has just been restarted. I had some maintenance, reinstallation and whatnot due to whatever reason. But in general, this is how it works. Minuscule load. And the same applies to memory usage. Also, this rig is equipped with 4 GB of RAM, so pretty much an overkill for IPFire. So my idea was that should I be able to just move some of the stuff from here into IPFire? And yeah, I should, because technically the hardware is there. Unfortunately, IPFire does not have host capabilities for hosting containers or VMs or whatnot. It's just a standalone sealed system with some additional add-ons you can install, but sadly neither any VM hypervisor or container engine, so none of that. Okay, so instead the idea was that what if I move IPFire into a VM and I use the remaining CPU power and memory on that rig to host some of the stuff located here. So in today's video we will just start with moving away from the standalone IPFire installation. We will install Proxmox, and within Proxmox we will install IPFire. Also, the first thing I will move away from this server is PiHole. So PiHole right now is running within a container, but since PiHole has a very little resource need, I will just start by moving that to the newly installed Proxmox based system. Also, I will add a scheduler that also has very little memory and CPU requirements, that is called Chronicle. I haven't used that in the past. I use Jenkins because this machine is pretty powerful, but Jenkins is just a resource hog for my needs. It's an overkill. I'm not using it for development purposes or CI or whatever. I just use it for scheduling, and yeah, again, an overkill. So let's get started with the new system. Let's install Proxmox, then install IPFire, PiHole and Chronicle. That will be pretty much for this first part of the series. Honestly, in this video I have no plans to provide a step-by-step tutorial on installing each of the components, especially not Proxmox, because as you will see, Proxmox is quite easy to install. To be honest, I'm not gonna lie, it's even easier to install than Windows. So let's just do it quickly. Without going into details, the drill is the usual. You download an image flash it to a flash drive, then boot the system from it and install. Yada yada, you know, the usual. Despite how sophisticated Proxmox is, it's still a very highly scalable system. So what I'm installing now is a 2-core system with around I think 2 GHz per core and 4 gigs of RAM. And yeah, other people run it on Threadrippers or home servers or whatnot, Intel Xeons. So I wonder how it will perform. The actual installation part took surprisingly long, even though the installation media is less than a gigabyte in size, and I've been installing it on an SSD. After the installation is done, the rest of the stuff related to Proxmox will be done via its web interface, so you just navigate to the URL shown on the last page of the installation wizard, then ignore that warning thing in the browser that is because of the self-signed certificate, and then you enter your username, which is root, and the password that you have provided during the installation process. If you're totally new to Proxmox, don't fret, feel free to ignore this whole subscription thing. It's totally optional, it provides you with extra features and support, so you might want to check out the documentation if you are interested. So we are at our first destination, we have Proxmox up and running, but since Proxmox is a hypervisor, it won't do much for us without an actual virtual machine running. So next we will install IPFire within a virtual machine. For that we will have to upload an ISO file of IPFire that will be used as a base for the virtual machine. Now that we have the ISO file uploaded, we start creating our first VM. So Proxmox once again shows its super intuitive and super user-friendly face, because the whole VM creation is just an easy wizard. Basically you can just go through all the options, leave them at default. You might want to cut down on the disk size though, and on the memory, because, well, IPFire doesn't need that much. After finishing the setup, we will have to come back for network configuration, because with the default settings it won't work. IPFire needs at least one more network interface card, being a firewall, so we will have to add that and any other network interface cards that you might want to use. So, in the hardware section of your Proxmox host, you can see all the network interfaces, all the network cards that are known to Proxmox. So by default, it won't utilize these, they are just there. You have to create so-called bridges, so you can assign them through these bridges to the VMs. That's what I'm doing right now. The machine has an additional Intel card which has 4 ports, and those are visible as 4 separate network interfaces, so obviously I will have to create 4 bridges. I just repeat these steps 4 times, and then I'm ready to use them. This is, by the way, a one-time process. You have to do it only once on fresh Proxmox installation, or later on if you add new network interface cards. With this finished, you have to either restart Proxmox, or you have to have this EF_up_down2 package installed, which I haven't figured out yet. So I'm just restarting it now. With this done, we will go to the hardware section of our VM, and this is where we will add those new bridges as network interface cards. So once again, I have to do this 4 times because of the 4 network interfaces. Also, Proxmox has a built-in basic firewall. You might want to turn that off for these network interfaces because, well, IPFire is a firewall. We don't need an additional layer. So the good news is we have finished with all the preparations, so at this point you should be able to install IPFire within Proxmox. So let's just do that. So I'm just starting the VM now, then switching over to console, where I will be able to see the boot screen of the IPFire installer. Here we go, this is like a boot screen of a fake BIOS. So at this point installation becomes very similar to what we have done in the past with the Raspberry Pi or with actually on this machine. So let's just skip this part because we're already familiar with the installation process of IPFire, and then go to our next part, which is having PiHole and Chronicle. So as you can see, we have a lot of options here. IPFire only uses a fragment of the CPU time, and we have plenty of memory and storage left. So my idea is that we will just bring up 2 additional VMs, one for PiHole and one for as a Docker host. We will need a Docker host because Chronicle is, well, yeah, you can install it on a bare Linux installation, but unless you want to mess with Node.js installation and whatnot, it's just easier for you to install it via a container. Also, I'm playing with the idea of migrating one or two smaller containers like my MQTT broker to this machine from the current server, so a Docker host seems just convenient. So the plan is that we will use Debian Linux, and we will create a VM based on it, and then we will just clone that VM because Debian can, as a generic purpose Linux distribution, can serve as both the base of our PiHole installation and of our Docker host. So let's just quickly install Debian. After installing Debian, we are almost there. So I decided to make that clone I mentioned before, and while at it I also renamed the original VM. So now I have 2 identical Debian Linux based VMs. One is called Docker host, one is called PiHole. We just need to install some software on them. So let's start with PiHole. Basically PiHole's installation on a Linux is just literally a one-liner. So you can just copy that command from the PiHole website and it will take care of all the details for you. Also, depending on the Linux distribution you are using, you might or might not have the tool called curl installed. This is required for PiHole, but it is also just a one-liner to install. So I needed to do that, and then back to installing PiHole. And as you will see, now I have a running PiHole installation. Next up, Chronicle. So Chronicle is a really interesting tool. It's a scheduler that I need for scheduling stuff like backups, checks, configurations, software updates, you name it. Actually, I haven't used it yet. I tried it in the Docker container on my main Docker host, and I'm surprised how lightweight it is and how useful it is. I mean, just look at the UI, nothing fancy, but it tries to give you all the details, all the information. You can just find everything by just 1 or 2 clicks, and it gives you a nice overview, diagrams, whatnot, also execution logs, and everything, pretty much everything you need. So yeah, you could just say that this is Cron on steroids and a fancy UI on top of it, but yeah, it's 2021. I really don't want to mess with Cron anymore. I mean, I could do that, but come on. Also, Chronicle can support multiple hosts, actually clusters, and that is something you cannot really do with Cron. I mean, scheduling jobs between different hosts and whatnot. So I'm still experimenting with it, but I really like it. Also, look at that memory usage. Seriously, 50 megabytes. The only downside is installation. It requires Node.js and whatnot, and personally I just really hate messing with Node.js. So I wish there was a way to install Node.js applications as a single binary and do not mess with installing Node.js itself, but Docker for the rescue. So there's a Docker container for this. You can just use that and forget about all the Node.js mumbo jumbo that you really don't want to mess with. So I will install it on the Docker host. For that, obviously, I will need to install Docker, Docker Compose, and probably Portainer. Portainer is a different story. I've been using it for a while, but with making this server separated from the other, I want to take its usage to the next level. So expect some Portainer related videos in the future. Anyway, back to installing Chronicle. The installation of Chronicle and Portainer happened via Docker Compose, and this is the Docker Compose YAML file that I've used. I've added the link to this file in the description, so don't worry, you don't have to type it in, but in case you want to try it, of course. But as you can see, in general it's pretty simple. Portainer we are already familiar with. Chronicle is also pretty simple. It just requires a few volumes, a single port, and pretty much that's it. So the usual basic Docker stuff. So I just started this in Docker Compose, and now let's see what happened with the Docker host. So as you can see, during the startup it ate up the CPU, but that is pretty normal for Docker. When it downloads stuff, it goes all out for all the possible performance it can rely on. But now it's just idles at around 11%, and this is the vCPU, so this is just a fragment of the actual CPU usage. Memory usage is a bit concerning regarding its idle and no jobs defined or whatnot, so I might need to give this VM a bit of RAM, but yeah, I still have like 1 gig left, so no problem. In general, if I take a look on the host now, these are the numbers I see. So it's actually pretty good, considering it's a 10-year-old CPU with 2 cores, and yeah, I think mission accomplished. Now it's up to me to test this stuff, to give actual load on it, because now everything is just idle, so no traffic on the IPFire, no traffic on PiHole, no tasks defined in Chronicle and whatnot. So we will soon see how this works out in general, but right now what I see is pretty good. Okay, I think this is it for this video. I've installed the basics, and next time there will be some hardware curiosities regarding that server, but I don't want to spoil the surprise. So stay tuned, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel and you are interested in this topic, please consider subscribing. I'm working hard on stuff, so you won't regret it, hopefully. Anyway, thanks for watching the video. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up, and really hope to see you next week, with the next installment of this series. Bye. You're still here. That's good, because that means you kinda liked my video. If so, feel free to check out these other videos too. And if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. That helps me a lot. And yeah, if you click the bell button, you will get also notified about new videos.